Hello and welcome to another episode of Alex's Afternoon Art Show. This time we're still doing Marvel Nemesis stuff because we can't escape truly. We're about halfway through though, thankfully. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel somewhat. But yeah, today we're doing Spider-Man, so this is one of those ones which thankfully isn't that different. So, maybe not too bad. Meh. Okay, so as per usual, I have done my base sketch. And yeah, so this is one of those times where I can actually show my reference because my reference is just a screenshot from from Spider-Man, because naturally it is. But yeah, I'll be using that reference for like the webs and stuff on his suit, so that'll just be to help me out. But first things first, before we get into anything, gotta make this a 180 degrees so that this is now more doable because yeah, Spider-Man, bit of a pain, but yeah. Okay, so with Spider-Man in particular in Marvel Nemesis, for whatever reason he's got a very square head, but he's also got very angry eyes. Again, that's a little bit of their own thing, but also largely it is movies. Movies were coming out at the time, so Spider-Man had the kind of the more angular eyes in those films, rather than kind of the rounder eyes that he normally has. So yeah, he had the angry eyes. And yeah, so that's what Marvel Nemesis used naturally, because that was what was popular at the time. But yeah, he also has the silver webs, which is from the movies. So, what I'm going to have to do is, later on, I will have to basically go and do a clipping mask of the webs. That is, yeah, going to be silver. Because, yeah, as of yet, it's a case of where, yeah, I'm not going to be doing the silver in its own layer. It would behoove me to do it as a clipping mask rather than its own layer. And it's best in this instance that we don't put too many lines on him, because it'll make our lives far harder later on whenever we have to put in the silver. It'll just make it look a little messy if there's too many lines going on it, because yeah, the idea is the webs are supposed to be, I mean, if they're silver, they're supposed to be metal. So what we'll want, if they're supposed to be metal, is that we're going to want them to not look like they're just part of the fabric of his suit. So we're gonna try and avoid doing too many lines on the red parts of his suit, which for now is going to end up looking a little sparse, but later on it will look better. And yeah, he's also looking a bit chunky here, which is partly due to the reference, to be honest. But yeah. Spider-Man's proportions, again, much like the proportions of basically every character in Marvel Nemesis, are real weird. In that he's really wide on the top, but he's quite thin at the bottom, which again, you wouldn't really expect from Spider-Man, given how he's supposed to be acrobatic. You'd expect his legs to be more muscular than his arms, or his shoulders in this instance. In Marvel Nemesis, Spider-Man is all shoulders. But yeah, something which you may have already noticed from seeing my face at the start is that I am groomed slightly more now. I have shaven, and I did get a haircut. However, my hair is still quite long. It's a little trimmed, but yeah. In a sense, I have finally exited hobo mode. However, not completely, it is still, hair is still long. And there's not much I can really do with it at this length. So I'll wait for it to get longer before anything else can be done with it. So much like we did with the last Spider-Man drawing, what we're going to be doing with the webs is we're going to be drawing that as a separate thing later on. As a separate thing in white, rather than putting lines around where it should be. We'll just be drawing that as its own thing later on, as it just makes life a lot easier. Makes life a lot easier in that sense, so we'll just leave it until then. Because yeah, we have this, at least still where our webs are supposed to be, but yeah. Right, now we've got the spider, and the spider on this Spider-Man is inconsistent naturally between the designs. So in the art for the game, it is very large. In the actual game, quite small. Quite small. It's the kind of the classic spider in that sense. So we'll kind of see what we're doing here in that regard. So the head should probably start somewhere like here. So this is reasonably simple. Again, Spider-Man is not terribly difficult. Well, in theory at least, Spider-Man is not terribly difficult to draw, I find. But it's a case of where there are certain things which can make Spider-Man take quite a while to draw, like depending on what the design looks like in terms of the spider, and how they do certain things like the webs. And that can take quite a while. Okay, there we have the spider done, and now we realistically just got to do his muscle, and then we can throw on stuff like the. You know what? We'll throw in the gloves now, I think, and just kind of the bulk of his body stuff we'll do now, because it'll just save us a little bit of time later. I mean, all this is gonna be my brain is not working today, but all this stuff is gonna need to go in anyways, so I may as well do it now while I'm up here. And yeah, this part is not going to be silver. There's no point in it being silver, because this is just the outline of it. So it's just going to be the webs themselves that are silver. See, this is the thing, the plus of this kind of very classic Spider-Man design is that it's a case of where majority of it is blue. So there's really not all that much I have to do when it comes to the webs. It's all very simple in that regard. So case of where at the bottom of his six-pack, that's kind of where that's where the red really ends, and then it's all blue basically on his legs and his arms, more or less. So I mean, here's the thing, I kind of I've touched a little bit on color distribution and kind of color reinforcement and stuff like that, but I mean it's not really relevant here because this is kind of how Spider-Man has always been. So I mean, this Spider-Man design is very much kind of what they were doing in the movies, and so I feel like regardless of what they were thinking of doing with Spider-Man's design in the game, it was always kind of going to be whatever they were doing in the movies at the time. Like if Spider-Man in the movies had just a straight up blue suit, that's probably what he would look like in this. I would be surprised if it was anything else. See, the thing with Spider-Man's feet in the game, in the game Spider-Man, is that his feet are kind of weird and floppy. So it's a case of where going off of that, it's a case of where because there's no separation between the blue on the feet and the blue elsewhere on Spider-Man's design in the game, it ends up kind of looking a little odd. So it's a case where I'm gonna have to thicken up his leg a little bit here, because it's a case of where it'll look strange if I don't. Because yeah, as I said, he has kind of weird floppy feet in the game. So it's a case of where I have to try and do a little bit of work to make that look a little less odd in this, because again, Spider-Man's feet would have a bit more shape here with this design, because he's using boots and not just the kind of soles that he has in Spider-Man. Okay, I believe that is the majority of our lines done. So yeah, this is the weird part, is that since we're not doing the webs on his suit yet, we're going to be waiting quite a bit before we get to that. So okay, so we're going to want to move on to the dots now. Strangely enough, that's where we're going next. Here's something I actually have to think about now. Since he's upside down, and the shade is always on the right side of the person, I need to make sure I put the shade on the left side of him, so that whenever I flip him back around, it'll be on his right. Because again, he's upside down. So that's a little bit of thinking I have to do there, so that I don't make that mistake, which again in this instance would be a very, very easy mistake to make, and I would look a fool for it. But again, much like with our lines, we need to be kind of careful that we don't overdo it with the dots on Spider-Man here, because we're going to be putting in the webs. So we don't want to kind of make it hard on ourselves to draw in the webs later on. Okay, that's our shading done. And now onto the colors. You know, I feel like I don't really have much to say about this design, and that I think is for the same reasons that I didn't have a huge amount to say about Venom, and why I didn't have much to say about Daredevil even, and it's because, I mean, they just look like the characters. They've not gone and done anything too weird or wacky with them. Like, it looks like Spider-Man. He looks like Spider-Man, and I mean, Venom looks like Venom, and Daredevil looks like Daredevil. But again, much like with those, there are these weird little changes they've made, like they gave him angry eyes, and yeah, like they gave him angry eyes. His suit has like the silver webs, stuff like this. A lot of this stuff is just kind of, I know the movie was popular, we'll just use his movie design. That's kind of really all there is to his design in the game, is that they just said, well, the movie design is popular, let's just use that, and they did. Well, that's really all there is to Spider-Man's design in the game. And yeah, I mean, there are those weird little proportional issues, but those are very much kind of indicative of the model quality, less so than the actual design, because you'll notice that in any of the art for the game, those proportional issues are not there. They're, well, proportioned more or less like humans, so yeah, it's not quite so much of an issue there. So it's very clearly just kind of the quality of the models, less so than any explicit or implicit purpose to that proportioning. Yeah, it is very much just kind of a weird thing that the models have, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like, yeah, there's kind of not a whole pile to say about Spider-Man or Venom or Daredevil or any of these characters, because I mean, they do just look like those characters. And the other reason why I'm not talking very much in this video is because I want these videos to be short, and by God the last bunch have not been short at all. They've not even been remotely short. The Storm one, which I would have thought would have been a quick one given how I didn't feel like I had very much to say about that design. That video went on for 42 minutes. Or, no it didn't, went on for like 48. The long ass video is the point I'm making anyways. Okay, we will do our blue first, because it seems as though there is slightly less blue than there is red. And naturally the colours are very dull in this game, so we're going to try and kind of maybe brighten them up a touch, but we don't want to stray too far away. I think Spider-Man is one of the more colourful characters in the game anyways, so yeah, let's darken this a little more. Alright, now we're into the bulk of this being the red. The bulk of our colours, but again, thankfully Spider-Man is one of those characters who has a small colour palette, more or less, so it shouldn't take too long. Now, I believe Spider-Man's red is less of a sweet red than it normally is, and is more of a kind of a rustier red in that sense, so I'll even bump it up one more into the orange. Because it won't really come out that orange in the final thing. So it needs to be a touch toner. Okay, and that's kind of red that we've got. Because again, our gradient map will do a lot of work to kind of bring out our colours a little bit more. Because yeah, for now, I don't think our our blue and our red are meshing all that well, really. So I think I'm going to need to make the blue darker. Maybe. We'll see. I think I will probably need to make it darker. Okay, so yeah, I think the blue needs to be darker. I think the blue definitely needs to be darker. It's a little bright right now. So we're gonna want to make it a little darker and deeper like that. So let's have a look and see what that does for us. Now, that looks a little better, I think. I think that looks a little better. So, whoop, I made a mistake. So now we've got to put on our silver. So, silver. So what we're going to want to do is, we're going to want to turn down the opacity on our red a little bit so that we can still see Spider-Man through it. So we know where to put our silver. So we're going to want this to still be kind of dark, to be honest. We're not going to want it to be too bright because then it'll look kind of weird. So we need to be very careful with how we're applying our silver here. We'll leave it on size 15. So, in Marvel Nemesis, Spider-Man has this kind of deal going on where it's kind of a bit more of a square kind of thing going on. Whoops. Right, so now we've got our webs in, and that took a little while, naturally. Of course it did. But, okay, so there's a few things I want to do. First off, I need to grab our background, so I'll be back in a moment after I've gotten the background. Okay, so we're back. We've thrown in our background. I need to make it bigger again. And so, now, next on the agenda is our shading, but first we'll put our black here so that I can grab it in a moment. But yeah, I don't know what this white line is about here. I think it's because I've rotated this, but I wonder. Yep, it's gone now that I've de-rotated it, but we need to rotate it back because it'll just make our lives a lot easier. So, first off, we need purple. I don't know how I did it, but I forgot to do the webs on his chest, or on his abdomen. So I'll have to do that in a second. Because yeah, apparently I had a lapse in brain power a little while ago, it appears. Okay, that's our darks done. Now our lights. This will most likely be a lot quicker, and then we've got to fix. We've got to fix these little bits of webbing, and then we've got to put in the webs in his hands. Then we've got to do our light line and a few other things, and then we're done. We are encroaching on the finish line. Alright. Time to do some very quick fixes. As quick as I can. I'll do these little bits of fixing. Okay. Now all we've got left to do, so I'll do the webs I think first before we do the light line or anything like that. Still has to go above all this stuff. So let's get rolling. So we want it to be white. We'll make it like a touch off-white. And then we'll bring this up. Now we know where it is. So we'll be kind of looping this through here and then up there like that. And then we'll put these little knots in there. Like so. That's as good as it's going to get, I think, for the web. Alright, so now we're going to do our light line. First, we will sign this. We shall put in our signature, which means I need to make sure I flip us back around for this part. So that we don't make another foolish error like I have recently. Alright, now our light line, and then we're basically done. Then we'll have to do our gradient maps, which will only take a moment. And yeah, that's it, really. Alright, so now we've got our gradient maps to do. So we'll throw on our texture. It's kind of fighting our red a little bit, so we'll run over and take the ugly gradient map, and we'll see how that does us here. Spider-Man actually doesn't destroy him too much, but we do want something else, something better, something stronger. We can rebuild it. So, new adjustment layer, gradient map. Now, so I think I've done a color grade like this before in the past, so we're just gonna get a kind of a deep kind of we'll make it even redder actually. Kind of brown color, and then we'll get a kind of a yellowy color here, like a pale yellow for your lights, and then in between we'll get proper brown, and even make it a little redder, make it a bit more salmony, like that. And so this is kind of simply just going to be what our gradient map will do for us here, and so we'll throw it on overlay. It's a bit aggressive. Throw it on soft light, which is what I mean to do. I'll bring it down to 60% and see how that looks for us. So, it's certainly better, I think. Yeah, it's a little better. It makes those blues look a little purpley, but yeah. So, that's kind of it. Spider-Man, bit of a quick one. Surprisingly fast, to be honest. And again, I feel like it's because there's not a huge amount which I had to add from the base sketch, much like I did with, much like Venom. Excuse me. Ooh. But yeah, the gradient map we ended up with is much kind of more a warmer color palette and a much more appetizing one at that than our as I've been calling it, the ugly gradient map. Not exactly doing it many favors in doing so, but yeah. Yeah, I think that's it really. Bit of a quick one this time, thankfully. Thankfully it has been quick. Because yeah, that was the kind of goal of these, was to make them all quick, but so far very few of them have been. So I'll try and kind of speed them up from here on out, so we're not going to be getting any too many which are kind of verging over the 40-minute mark. But yeah, I don't feel like I had much to say about this, because again, I even mentioned this in the bulk of this, which is that it's just Spider-Man. He just looks like Spider-Man, which I mean isn't a bad thing. It's just a case of where in a series or in a mini series such as this where it's designed for me to be nitpicking about the designs. I mean, he's just got Spider-Man's design. He doesn't look terrible, he doesn't look great, but I mean, it's Spider-Man. But yeah, stuff like the silver webs, stuff like this, a bit weird, angry eyes, that type of stuff. Yeah, and his kind of duller colors don't really appeal greatly to me, but I imagine the designers were into it maybe. If they weren't, I don't know what they were doing. I don't know why they did it if they weren't into it. But yeah, that was kind of really all we've covered in this one. I feel like, yeah, a lot of the stuff that I talked about with Spider-Man I kind of already did in the other video. But yeah, so I didn't really talk about how this kind of Spider-Man pose is, but I mean, yeah, I mean, it's really not that tricky. Just doing it upside down, and again, there's an abundance of reference which you can find from Spider-Man, so that just makes life a lot easier in that sense, because Spider-Man's poses are by nature not really all that feasible to get reference for. Otherwise, they're very particular poses. But yeah, so that was the video. If you liked it, do what you normally do. Like and subscribe. That one kind of hurt my stomach though to say that. I just kind of maybe gave that one a little bit too much gusto. Anyways, yeah, like and subscribe. Do the stuff you normally do. Just yeah, whatever. But yeah, bye bye.